How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be breaking down every single fight on UFC 300, starting with the early prelims, ending with the main event. So let's get right to it. The first fight on the card is Deiveson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt. Can I just say, what a crazy opening card fight. I mean, prelim opener, but still, what a crazy prelim opener this card has. This is the best card in history. I don't care what anyone says. I haven't been this hyped for a, card of fights, and I don't know when. I mean, I think this is the most hype I've ever been for a card of fights, so I'm going to really enjoy breaking this down. Hopefully the video doesn't get too long, but Deiveson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt. Now, these guys are both, riding some momentum right now. Cody Garbrandt, has had a rough career, to kind of say it. I mean, he was a former champion, immediately lost the belt to TJ Dillashaw, so he's had a hell of a, turnaround in his career if you consider where he came from with, how dominant he looked before to now. Lost to Pedro Munoz, lost to Rob Font, lost to Kai Kara France, and recently coming off of 2 wins over Trevin Jones and Brian Kelleher. But those guys are like, bottom of the barrel UFC fighters. I mean, arguably shouldn't even be in the UFC. I mean, Trevin Jones, sure, you can keep him around, but Brian Kelleher, man, I mean, dude's a literal bum. And now he's fighting Deiveson Figueiredo, who I think is, I think Deiveson Figueiredo is going to do very well at flyweight in his career. He was a bantamweight champion, had the whole saga with Brandon Moreno and fought Alex Perez, fought Rob Font in his bantamweight debut. And, I mean, he came close to knocking him out a couple times, had a very, decisive decision against Rob Font, which I think is looking good for him going into this fight. I wouldn't pick Cody Garbrandt over Rob Font. So, I mean, Deiveson Figueiredo, I think he has the KO power on his side, even though Cody Garbrandt does have KO power, and if he wins this fight, he is going to KO Deiveson Figueiredo. But Deiveson Figueiredo's got gnarly power. He's got great submissions. He submitted a ton of people. And he has great cardio. He has the ability to go the distance. I mean, sometimes he would get tired at flyweight, but I think that was mostly due to him being super drained. I mean, if you saw the weight cuts he did at flyweight, man, they were gnarly. But, I think he's probably just going to be able to land more damage on Cody Garbrandt, and I think he's probably going to accumulate a bunch of damage. He's going to land a big shot and put Cody Garbrandt to sleep. Cody Garbrandt has no chin at this point in time. I mean, I was convinced Brian Kelleher could have potentially knocked him out. I didn't pick him, but I thought it was a real possibility that if Brian Kelleher lands the right shot, Deiveson Figueiredo is going to sleep. Or not Deiveson Figueiredo, sorry, Cody Garbrandt. So I am going to be going Deiveson Figueiredo in this fight via KO. I'm going to say round 2. I'm going to say round 1, he's popping Cody Garbrandt. Maybe Cody Garbrandt has a little bit of success in the first round, but I just think Deiveson Figueiredo is going to be too much. I think he's going to be moving a lot. I think he's going to be stalking down Cody Garbrandt. And I think they're both going to kind of clash, and that's not going to end well for Cody Garbrandt. I'm going Deiveson Figueiredo, second round KO. Let's move on to the next fight. Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Now, I've kind of flip-flopped on this fight throughout, the last week or so. Jim Miller, 40 years old. This is going to be his last fight in the UFC, he said. But he's been doing good recently, looking at his last 5 fights, 2 wins over Nicholas Mota and Donald Cerrone. Not great wins, but not bad wins by any means, especially for someone the age Jim Miller is. And a loss to Alexander Hernandez, again, not great at all. And beat Jesse Butler by KO and Gabriel Benitez by submission, respectively. So I do believe that Jim Miller can still compete with a guy like Bobby Green. They've both been around forever. They're both veterans of the sport. But I think Bobby Green has been facing way better competition as of recently. Lost to Jalen Turner by brutal knockout, one of the worst stoppages I've ever seen in my entire life. That ref needs to be fired immediately. Beat Grant Dawson by KO, which no one saw coming, and Bobby Green just went out there and KO'd him, did his thing. And beat Tony Ferguson by submission. And then the DQ against Jared Gordon, but, that fight kind of looks bad for him anyways, considering he was losing to Jared Gordon, but I don't think Jared Gordon's terrible. So, for my official prediction for this fight, I am going to be trusting in Bobby Green. Most people are picking Jim Miller. It's a 61-39 for Jim Miller right now. But I just think Bobby Green's got a little bit more juice left in the tank than Jim Miller. I think, he's going to be able to move. I mean, he's quite a couple of inches taller than Jim Miller. They got the same reach, but I feel like Bobby Green is going to be able to use his more effectively. And I do think he will win a decision by just kind of moving a lot and popping Jim Miller in the face over and over again with a jab too. And yeah, I think the fight's going to be okay. I don't think it's going to be a barn burner or, a very interesting fight per se, but I do think Bobby Green's going to get the job done. So I'm going to pick Bobby Green via 29-28 decision, with Jim Miller probably winning like the last round or something. Moving up on the card, we got Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. I feel like this is one of those fights where someone's going to KO someone. And I know that's kind of difficult to say with women's MMA nowadays, but legitimately, both these girls got pop in their shots. Marina Rodriguez has those gnarly knees. Jessica Andrade, just has cement blocks for hands and, quite literally punches like a man. So, they're both, not looking great recently. Marina Rodriguez got a win over Michelle Waterson-Gomez in her last fight, who shouldn't be in the UFC anymore. Lost to Verna Jandiroba, lost to Amanda Lemos, who, okay, they're pretty good competition. And beat Yan Xiaonan, which is aged pretty well, and beat Mackenzie Dern. Jessica Andrade beat Lauren Murphy by decision. Lost to Erin Blanchfield, Yan Xiaonan, and Tatiana Suarez consecutively. I was convinced she was just taking dives and showing up for paychecks at that point in time. But then all of a sudden she comes back and brutally KOs Mackenzie Dern. So, Mackenzie Dern, not that great, but, at least she's coming off of a win in this fight. If you couldn't tell by my, intonations there, I am going to pick Jessica Andrade via first round KO. I just think, Marina Rodriguez is hittable. We've seen her been hit before. So, lost to Amanda Lemos by KO. So I think Jessica Andrade will be able to do something similar, stalk her down, and knock Marina Rodriguez out in the first round. Moving up on the card, we got Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. I believe this was the last fight added to UFC 300, and what a banger fight. It's classic striker versus grappler. Renato Moicano is going to want to go out there. He's going to want to take Jalen Turner down, rinse and repeat, try to control him, maybe look for a submission eventually. And Jalen Turner is going to want to keep it on the feet, keep his range, use his teeps to the body, use that jab, and use that threat of the power to keep Renato Moicano off of him. So where am I leaning in this fight? I think Jalen Turner is going to win this fight, and I think he's going to KO Renato Moicano. However, I do think it's a little absurd that Jalen Turner is favored 77% on Tapology. I do think Renato Moicano can win this fight. He seemed quite durable throughout his career, but I think Jalen Turner's got too much power, too much leverage with those long, lanky arms. He's really only lost to elite-level fighters, Dan Hooker and Mateusz Gamrot. That kind of sounds weird saying Dan Hooker's an elite-level fighter. But honestly, I thought he won that fight. You can come at me all you want, but I seriously thought, Jalen Turner won that fight. If you go rewatch that fight and you still think Dan Hooker won that fight, I don't know what to tell you. But I'm going Jalen Turner via round 1 KO. It's going to be brutal. Renato Moicano is getting Bryce Mitchelled in this fight. Mark my words. Moving up on the card, Sadiq Youssef versus Diego Lopez. Another banger fight. I absolutely love all of the matchmaking on this card, except for, the next fight, but we'll get to that. Diego Lopez has looked phenomenal in his short career in the UFC thus far. He's had 3 fights in the UFC, came in and debuted against Movsar Evloev. Super tough debut, but looked incredible in that fight, almost had a couple submissions. I thought Movsar Evloev won decisively, but, what a showing for Diego Lopez's first entrance into the UFC. Beat Gavin Tucker easily with a armbar, I believe. It was a triangle armbar, that's right. He got Gabriel Tucker, I believe. Yeah, Gavin Tucker, sorry. I'm looking at another Gabriel on here. But he got Gavin Tucker into a triangle choke and rolled into mount. Or was that... Yeah, that was against Gavin Tucker because Pat Sabatini he KO'd. Sorry, I'm getting all mixed up here, but he got into a mounted triangle position and got Gavin Tucker to tap. Super impressive in quick fashion. Gavin Tucker, not, the greatest competition, but still, it was very impressive to see his ability to do that. And Pat Sabatini, I mean, Pat Sabatini is quite honestly a little bit underrated. I do think Pat Sabatini is a good fighter, and he easily KO'd him very fast in the first round. Let's take a look at Sadiq Youssef. Sadiq Youssef, last loss to Edson Barboza by decision, was beating the dog shit out of Edson Barboza early in the fight, but gassed out Edson Barboza, drug him into the later rounds, and like the crafty veteran he is, he just put the pace on him and, put the pressure on and, fairly won a decision against Sadiq Youssef. Props to him. Before that, coming off a win over Don Shainis by submission and Alex Caceres by decision. So again, not the greatest competition. These guys are both a little bit untested. I think Sadiq Youssef is a little bit more tested. But either way, I mean, these guys are both young killers. And Sadiq Youssef lost to Arnold Allen as well. And a win over Andre Fili. So who do I think is going to win this fight? I've gone back and forth on this fight between, Sadiq Youssef winning by decision and Diego Lopez winning by submission, but I think I've got my pick locked in. I am happy to say it because I'm a huge fan of him. I am going Diego Lopez via second round submission. I think Diego Lopez is good enough to hang on the feet with Sadiq Youssef, and I think he's got a superior grappling advantage. So I'm going to go Diego Lopez second round of rear naked choke over Sadiq Youssef. Let's move up on the card. Holly Holm versus Kayla Harrison. So, oh man, I don't even want to break down this fight. Just here we go, I guess. I think Kayla Harrison's going to win this fight. She's looked far more dominant recently than Holly Holm has looked. Holly Holm is old as shit. She's 42 and still fighting. Kayla Harrison only one loss to, who the fuck did she lose to? Larissa Pacheco. Or Pacheco. I'm not quite sure how you say that. Pacheco, yeah, there is a C. Sorry. Larissa Pacheco, I don't know anything about PFL or the fighters over there, or Bellator, or wherever the fuck she was, so I can't say a lot about Kayla Harrison, but I can give you guys a little rant about Holly Holm. Holly Holm beat Raquel Pennington by decision, beat Irene Aldana by decision, lost to Caitlin Vieira by decision, and beat Yana Santos by decision. So, Irene Aldana, Raquel Pennington, decent wins, but again, I mean, they're just, I can't believe these are championship level women, but let's not get too disgusted by this. And then lost via first round submission to Mayra Bueno Silva by a standing ninja choke, but it was overturned due to Mayra Bueno Silva having Adderall, I believe it was, some sort of ADHD medication. So now it's, I guess a no contest. But, I mean, in my opinion, I still count that as a win for Mayra Bueno Silva. So, in this fight, I do think Kayla Harrison, from what little I know about her, she is good at jiu-jitsu. I think she's going to submit Holly Holm in the first or second round. I mean, Holly Holm just showed her weakness to submissions, and I think Kayla Harrison's going to jump at the opportunity to take advantage of that. So, moving up on the card, we got Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling. This is on the prelims. This is craziness, dude. But either way, we got Aljamain Sterling, the former bantamweight champion. Coming off a bunch of wins. I mean, if you can, some of them are like, if you can call it a win. Petr Yan disqualification, illegal knee. But then fairly beat Petr Yan in a decision the fight after that, which is an incredible win. Beat TJ Dillashaw. Again, kind of a fluky win, right? I mean, his shoulder kept popping out, so we just kind of took him down and beat the shit out of him on the ground until, he TKO'd him. And beat Henry Cejudo by split decision. Fair enough. I have no gripes with the way that fight turned out. And then recently got KO'd 7 months ago by Sean O'Malley, for Sean O'Malley to become the bantamweight champion. I never in a million moons would have seen that coming. But hey, I mean, props to Sean O'Malley, right? So, Calvin Kattar got a win over Danny. Man, I'm not going to go that far back. That's 3 years ago. And in the last year-ish, almost 2 years, I mean, it's been a year and 5 months since he fought. He fought Arnold Allen, got a pretty bad knee injury, so I think that's going to be worrying for him coming into this fight. And his record's been kind of spotty back and forth even before then. So, I think this is a no-brainer in my opinion. I mean, I do see some people picking Calvin Kattar, which is shocking. I guess it's just because Sterling coming off of a KO loss and moving up a weight class, but Sterling was a huge bantamweight. I don't think he's going to have an issue dealing with featherweights. And on top of that, I mean, Calvin Kattar coming off a knee injury, I mean, that's way worse than coming off a KO loss, in my opinion. I'm going to go Aljamain Sterling by decision. I don't think Calvin Kattar is going to get submitted here. I do think that he's just going to get controlled and kind of wrestle fucked by Aljo. I like Aljo, but I don't think it's going to be an interesting fight. So, hey, I mean, if you got to go, get some food for the main card and the prelim headliner, do it here and during the Kayla Harrison fight. Next fight, Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. Whoo! Can't believe this is on the prelims. Yuri Prochazka is one of my favorite fighters. Alexander Rakic is also a very interesting fighter. I mean, he can't have some shitty performances, but, got a lot of KOs to his name as well. So this should be a banger. Yuri Prochazka, coming from Ryzen, and then he came to the UFC. He's had 4 UFC fights, and he's been a champion. That's crazy. But beat Volkan Oezdemir by KO. Beat Dominic Reyes, just killed Dominic Reyes, turned Dominic Reyes into a corpse in that fight. Dominic Reyes hasn't been the same since. And beat Glover Teixeira by 5th round submission. None of us saw that coming. He was losing that fight. He had a really great showing, even though he was losing, but got the submission in the 5th round against Glover Teixeira to take the belt. Not hard to do. I know people like to knock that fight and say Yuri's not that good. It was Old Man Glover. Old Man Glover was running through the light heavyweight division, so let's calm down there. And then recently coming off the KO loss to Alex Pereira. I believe the fight was stopped early, and I mean, Yuri's has insane recovery. We've seen it in the past, so I'm a little salty about that one still. I'm still coping over that loss, but fair enough. Let's not harp on that too much. Alexander Rakic, last time he fought, 1 year and 10 months ago, almost 2 years ago, also coming off of a leg injury, similar to Calvin Kattar, even though it was more of a Thomas Aspinall-esque leg injury, against Jan Blachowicz. So I'm just going to lay it out flat for you guys. I think Yuri Prochazka is going to brutally chin Alexander Rakic in the 1st or 2nd round. Alexander Rakic, he's been out for so long. I'm worried about the ring rust. I made a whole video about this, so if you want a more in-depth breakdown of this fight in particular, go check the channel. You'll see the video. It should pop right up. But, I mean, who's he even really beat before that? Thiago Santos, Anthony Smith, Jimmy Manuwa, and I know I'm grasping at straws. The resume isn't really the biggest detail in this fight. They both don't have the best of resumes, so I'm not going to harp on that too much, but I think Yuri Prochazka is going to KO him. I think he's going to put the pressure on Rakic, and I think Rakic is going to be a little scared of the power. I think Rakic will try to grapple in this fight, but I mean, if Yuri Prochazka is getting up from Glover Teixeira's takedowns, who's a much better grappler than Rakic in my opinion, he's going to have no problem with grappling with Rakic, and I do think he will brutally KO Alexander Rakic in the 2nd or 1st or 2nd round. Jesus. Moving up on the card, Charles Oliveira versus Arman Tsarukyan. What a banger of a fight. So, we got Charles Oliveira, was pretty, just had an incredible run at lightweight after, having a pretty bad run at featherweight. Beat Michael Chandler to get the belt, submitted Dustin Poirier from standing, and submitted Justin Gaethje in the first 3 minutes. Then he had a pretty devastating loss against Islam Makhachev. Islam Makhachev showed out against Charles Oliveira. They had a competitive first round. Islam got Charles down. Charles got back up. It was a pretty even first round. I leaned Islam in the scoring. And then in the 2nd round, Islam took Charles down not even took him down. He dropped Charles with a right hook, I believe, and then submitted him with an arm triangle. And after that, Charles bounced back, got a KO over Beneil Dariush in the 1st round. So, Charles Oliveira, great submission ability, has the most submissions in UFC history. Never in a boring fight. I think this fight's going to be the best fight on the card. I'm looking forward to it the most of any fight on the card. But let's get into Arman Tsarukyan. Arman Tsarukyan beat Yoel Alvarez by KO, lost to Mateus Gamrot. That should be a win. He beat Mateus Gamrot by decision in my mind and most other people's minds. Beat Demiral Magulov by decision. Beat Joaquim Silva by KO, but was also brutally rocked in that fight. People like to forget. And KO'd Beneil Dariush in even more devastating fashion than Charles Oliveira. So, who do I think is going to win this fight? Arman Tsarukyan, young, 27 years old. Charles Oliveira, 34, approaching that 35 mark. Charles Oliveira got 3 inches in height and 2 inches in reach, so I do think he'll have the distance availability advantage in this fight. I do think he'll have the distance advantage in this fight. So, in my opinion, I think Charles Oliveira is going to knock out Arman Tsarukyan in the first round. Arman Tsarukyan, as good as he is, I do believe he's an elite level fighter, but I don't believe he's good enough to beat Charles Oliveira yet. If he was fighting Dustin Poirier, I'd probably pick Arman Tsarukyan. Even if he was fighting Justin Gaethje, I'd probably pick Arman Tsarukyan. But Charles Oliveira, I don't think, Arman Tsarukyan is going to be able to use the ground game. Even if he does get Charles down, you don't want to be, I know I'm going to sound like Joe Rogan here, but you don't want to be on the ground with him. You're going to be constantly being hit by elbows, slicing elbows, and he's going to be throwing up submissions, and he's got a good get-up game. So I do think Charles Oliveira, with the reach advantage, with his gnarly power, and with Arman Tsarukyan being KO'd in the past and rocked in the past a couple times, I think Arman Tsarukyan's going to get brutally chinned in this fight in the first round. Let's move up on the card. Bo Nickal versus Cody Brundage. I got those two fights switched around, but whatever. Bo Nickal's going to win this easily. First round submission. I'm going to say arm triangle over Cody Brundage. Bo Nickal 5-0, beat some people on the Contender Series. Has only had 2 UFC fights. Submitted Jamie Pickett after, kneeing him in the groin. Just disgraceful. But then KO'd Val Woodburn. Fair enough. I'm not going to, shit on him for that. Cody Brundage, or Cody Bumdage, as I like to call him, got KO'd by Mikhail Oleksiejczuk, got submitted by Rodolfo Vieira, so he does have a submission weakness, and got DQ'd Jacob Malkoun. Jacob Malkoun was winning the fight. Cody Brundage took I think it was a illegal elbow to the back of the head or something like that. He took an illegal elbow, and it didn't even hurt him at all, but he acted like it was the end of the world, trying to get the Aljamain Sterling Award. So, then beat Zach Reese by, Batista bombing him. So, what do I think is going to happen in this fight? I already said at the beginning of, when I read this fight out, Bo Nickal, first round arm triangle. This is a no-brainer in my opinion. Most people agree with me. Cody Brundage is a bum, doesn't belong in the UFC. Bo Nickal's going to get it done. Next fight on the card. Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway, the featured fight. Holy shit! This is good matchmaking. I love the matchmaking on the card, but I do have some gripes about the matchmaking on this fight, so I'm a little bipolar about this fight. It's going to be super exciting to see the night of the fight, but I wanted different things for both of these guys. I wanted Gaethje to get a title shot, and I wanted Holloway to get a title shot, and now that could get a little murky if one of them gets finished. Do you know what I'm saying? So let's get through the fighters. Max Holloway, only loss recently is, the 3 losses to Alexander Volkanovski. Other than that, he's looked sensational, coming off a win over Arnold Allen and Chan Sung Jung, the Korean Zombie, brutally KO'd the Korean Zombie, won a unanimous decision against Arnold Allen. Arnold Allen, looked better than people give him credit for in that fight, but that's besides the point. We're here to talk about Max Holloway. Justin Gaethje coming off the brutal head kick KO over Dustin Poirier, and before that, a majority decision against Rafael Fiziev. Now, who do I think is going to win this fight? Both basically identical heights and reaches. Gaethje a few years older than Holloway. I think I'm going with Justin Gaethje. I do think Max Holloway can win this fight by decision, but the problem is I don't think he's going to make it to a decision. I think Justin Gaethje is going to brutally KO him in the second round. I think he's going to be chopping the legs of Holloway for the entire first 2 rounds to limit the movement of Holloway so Holloway can't, move and jab him to a decision. And I think Justin Gaethje is just going to have too much pressure, too many weapons to use against Max Holloway, and I think he's going to get the job done via either a head kick KO. I mean, who knows? This may be the new norm with Justin Gaethje. I'm not going to predict a head kick KO. That was a bit of a joke. I'm going to say a right hand, left hook, maybe KO for Justin Gaethje in the second round in brutal fashion. Not a TKO. It's going to be a KO. It's going to be sad. We're going to see Max Holloway flattened out on the canvas. it's going to be sad to see because I really thought, Max Holloway, I mean, he arguably is the most deserving of a title shot against Ilia Topuria right now, but looks like we're going to get Movsar Evloev versus Ilia Topuria if what I predict is going to happen happens. Let's move on to the co-main event. Not super hyped for this fight, but it is what it is. We got too many good fights to complain. Zhang Weili versus Yan Xiaonan. Now, Yan Xiaonan, known for her power. Zhang Weili, known for her well-roundedness. She has good power and great grappling. So I do think Zhang Weili stylistically can win this fight everywhere, but I do favor her to probably out-grapple Yan Xiaonan to a decision. If not, maybe she gets a later round TKO via ground and pound. But I think she's not going to give Yan Xiaonan any room in this fight to stand and, try to keep Weili at distance because that's the way Yan Xiaonan can win the fight. But I give Yan Xiaonan almost no chance of winning this fight. I mean, in the women's strawweight division, I don't think there's many people that can beat Zhang Weili, so I'm going to be going Zhang Weili via 50-45, maybe even 50-44, dominant decision. I don't have much else to say about the fight. I mean, it's not a super exciting fight. There's not a lot of different, things that can happen in the fight. I think I've got it pretty much nailed down to, a decision win for Zhang Weili. Let's move on to the main event, Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. Now, when I used to speculate about this fight and think about this fight, kind of as a fantasy matchup, I used to think Jamal Hill would win because, I was imagining a fully healthy Jamal Hill and, Jamal Hill's got decent striking as well, decent boxing. So the reason I'm going to switch in this fight and I am going to pick Alex Pereira now that it has become a reality, I do believe that Jamal Hill is still injured. He said it recently, I think it was the fight week of UFC 298, he said that he was still injured and he had, no idea the fight was happening until it was announced. So Jamal Hill coming in off that brutal injury, I tore his Achilles playing basketball. That's never a good thing. But beat Glover Teixeira, beat the dog shit out of Glover Teixeira, beat Thiago Santos, KO'd him. Alex Pereira coming off of a win over Yuri Prohaska by KO and a split decision win over Jan Blachowicz, as well as that brutal KO loss to Israel Adesanya. So, what are the factors in this fight? Jamal Hill has a glaring weakness to a left hand, so I do think, Alex Pereira is going to be able to brutally KO him. And the leg kicks as well, man. I think it's going to be too much for Jamal Hill, who's either just freshly healed or is still healing. I think those leg kicks are going to be a massive problem, and I do not think Jamal Hill is going to be able to deal with the leg kicks and the left hook combination and just the overall power of Alex Pereira. So I am going to go Alex. I do think Hill, however, I do think Hill is a little faster. Could he catch Pereira? For sure, but that's not what I'm going to predict to happen. I'm going to go Alex Pereira via second round KO via left hook. And I think it's going to be, I'm going to say TKO. I think he's going to left hook Jamal Hill. Jamal Hill's going to fall, be dropped badly. He's going to land a couple follow-up shots, and the ref's going to call it off. But anyways, that's the entire card. What a crazy card. I think this is historically the best card on paper. Who knows how it's going to play out the night of the fight? We never do until, we obviously see it. But I'm super excited to watch these fights. Let me know what you guys think of my predictions down below, if you agree or if you disagree on certain fights. And thank you guys so much for watching.